Welcome back to week 6 with Now Dev Notes and me, Faith, your key study partner. I can't believe that this is the second to last video of our application development series. Last week we focused on access control. We focused on how do we make sure only the people we want to have access has that access. And we focused on how to do roles and create those important access controls. This week we're focusing on automation. And we're talking about automation with Flow Designer, responding to events, and it's going to be a great time. Let's get started. So why is automation important, especially in applications? Well, remember, we're always trying to provide value to the business, and especially throughout the business day. So if a person is doing the same repetitive task over and over again, that's taking away time from something else that they could be doing. So automation is making a process smoother, and it's allowing those workers to work on other more impactful tasks while still ensuring that the needs that the automation is filling is still being done. So the first thing that we'll talk about in regards to automation is Flow Designer. Well, what is Flow Designer? Flow Designer is just a non-technical interface that allows for process automation to occur. And this automation takes place through something called flows. Flows are just an automated sequence of actions that can be used to automate processes within a business. Secondly, a flow has to have actions. And actions are just what the system will actually execute after the flow has been triggered. And once again, there's 3 actions that fall into this category. It can either be an action, it can be flow logic, or it can be a subflow. And finally, every flow is going to have data, some kind of data that is collected or created. And this data is stored in something known as data pills. So Flow Designer is great to use in application development because it requires little technical knowledge and it's pretty easy to use. It has like a drag and drop interface, and I know what is on each part because of the natural language descriptions that are used. So let's take a look at how Flow Designer can be used in our application.
Remember, each flow has 3 key parts: a trigger, actions, and data. So a trigger is where you have to start. Remember, that is what is going to get this flow started. So there are 3 types of triggers. The first is a record-based trigger, and it will just run a flow after a record has either been created, updated, and then the final option is created or updated. The second option is date. So if this is a date-based flow, it will just run at a specific date or time, depending on which one is selected. And then finally, we have the application trigger. And if the flow is application-based, it is added when the app's spoke is activated. And a spoke is just a bundled set of related applications. So these are the 3 types of triggers that can be selected. Again, I'm going to have a trigger for created because I want this flow to be triggered when a new room request is created. Remember, I want the task to be created after the room is created. So then you just go to the table and begin looking for the room. So again, room request. So when a room request is created, this is when I want this flow to run. And then you also can add conditions if needed, and there are advanced options. And then I click done. And always make sure you save as you go. So now that the trigger has been created, now we're going to add actions. And actions are made up of inputs, steps, and outputs. And actions, again, are just the operations that we want to happen now that this flow has been triggered. So all you have to do is click on the plus button, and then you either can choose an action, flow logic, which is when we're talking about like if, else kind of things, and then or you can have a subflow. So the first action that I created is remember, the whole goal of this is to create a room request task when a room request record has been made. So the action that I want is to create a record. The table that I wanted, again, this was just a drop down before, so I would just click on this field here, and then I selected the room request task table because that is where the record is going to be inserted. I also have the fields here. So what fields do I want to be populated when this record is created? So the assigned to, field, I wanted it to be Beth. And then the description here, and again, these are just the fields from that table. Here you see I have the data pills here. The way that you can do it, you either can use the data pill picker, or you can do it the way that I did, and then you just go over to the record that you want. So in this description, this first one is going to start out with the person's name. So I come over here to my data pills, I go to the room request record, and then I go down to requested by, and then I'm going to click on first name. So that way, the person's name is automatically going to be populated when this new task record is created. And once I've done this, I'm going to click done, and then I always click save. Secondly, instead of adding an action this time, I have some if else logic here. And what that would look like is at the top, I clicked flow logic instead of action. Because when you click flow logic, here's where you can do if, for each, just things that are kind of like decisions or options. So that is what I did up here at the top, right under my first action. Once you do that, first you have to start with a label. So this is the special request checks. And again, from my table, this is the special request field. So once again, you would just come over here to the room request record, because that's where that field is. Go down to special requests, and then I would just click and drag. And so this is saying if that field is yes, then in the then, there's always a little plus right here next to the then. Then I want to send an email. I'm just sending an email letting the person know that this happened. This is going to the approver, because again, for the action, I just selected send the email, the subject here as well in the body. So this is saying if it is selected as yes, send the approver an email, and then also ask them for approval. And when you do the ask for approval action, you have to first select what record is this going to be based on. So for me, this is going to be on my room request task record, because that is where my approval field is. And then you also have to say, how does this get approved? Approved or rejected. So approve when anytime when Beth, or you could add a group, or you could create just a whole new role. So approve this record anytime that Beth approves it. And then you also can add a due date. So like if no one does anything by this date, you can approve, reject, or just cancel it. And then once again, you click done. And so I did that for if. Make sure that you have the else if right under the if. You want all of this in line. This shows that this is one piece of flow logic right here. So again, if special request is yes, send an email, ask for approval. If the approval is approved, send them an email that says, hey, you've been approved. And if not, send them an email that says you're not approved. You see, I exit my if, because here's my if. I'm exiting it with another else. So I made sure to click the plus sign that is outside. So not this inside one, because that adds to this inside logic. I come outside. Else, if the special request field is not selected yes, then come down here. Else, I want to update the record. I want to update that record for the room request task, and I want the approval status to be approved. Click done. And I want to send them an email. Once you have done this, you click save. Now that we've clicked save, before you activate it, it is good to test. There's built-in testing. I'm going to put in a room request record, because remember that is my trigger, and click run test. Once the test has finished running, you will click on it to see the execution details. And you'll see here that my room request task record was created. All of this logic was skipped because the special request field was not selected with yes. So it skipped all of that if logic, and it came down here to the else. It updated the record, made the approval status approve, and it sent an email with the information that I wanted. And once you're done testing, you want to make sure you click activate. And now your flow will run when it is triggered.
So let's talk about something called a script include. A script include is so useful in ServiceNow because it is just a reusable piece of code, specifically server-side JavaScript code, that can be used throughout. It's great because you can just write the code one time, including the functions and methods that are needed, and then you can reuse it over and over, which cuts down on writing repetitive code, again, taking away time that could be done doing something else.
So here's my script include. So inside of Studio, you would just go to create application file, begin typing script include, and then you will click create. So you would begin with the name as usual. Mine is for booking reminders. That is the focus of this JavaScript code. And then I have the caller access, which is none. Remember, we have the caller restriction, which just puts only authorized users that can access this. And then we also have caller tracking if we wanted to like track who did what. Client callable to just say that this server-side code can be called from client-side scripts. We have the accessible from. Again, I selected all application scopes just because, remember, this code is reusable and I want to be able to use this in many places. But you also can put this application scope only, but that is limiting. And you make sure that you select active because if it's not active, then you won't be able to implement it. I have a description here. Again, this will just send automated reminders for the room booking scheduled for the following day. So remember, this code is literally just going to trigger a custom event. So let's actually look at the code and understand it a little bit better. I begin by creating a class. Remember that your class name needs to also match the name of your script include. So I did that by using class.create. So I then am going to create a prototype. And so the prototype is important because it contains all of the logic. I think of it as just like the instructions for what to include inside of this newly instantiated object that came from the class. So inside of this prototype, or like I said, the instructions, I begin with an initialize function. I don't have anything in it right now, but in the future, I might want to start this new object with properties that starts it off. So I might want to start each object off with a title every single time. So I just had that there so that I can move my code forward in the future. I then have this function here, and this is the send reminders function. It begins first by creating a new instance of the glide date time class, which is just going to give us an object that has the date and the time. In line 8, I then took that current glide date and time and I'm adding 1 day to it because again, this code is checking for all of the bookings that will be happening for tomorrow, the next day, right? Because it's supposed to be a reminder. So I added 1 to that newly instantiated object. And then finally, remember the glide date and time object will have the date and the time, but I only want the date. So in this line 9, I'm just only getting the date from that object. Line 11 and 12, in line 11, once again, I am creating a new instance of the glide date and time class, but I'm instantiating with the start date that came from above. So it's not starting just completely empty. And once again, I'm going to add 1 day to it because again, I want to make sure that I'm getting all of those dates within that 24-hour period. So in line 14 through 17, I'm first beginning by creating a new glide record object that will hold. I'm creating a new glide record. I'm creating a new glide record object that is going to be holding the room request table. In line 15 and 16, I'm adding a query. So these are the conditions that the system will be looking for. So for line 15, I'm beginning with the start time field. That field's value should be greater than or equal to the start date. And then the second one I have is I'm still in the start time field and I want that value to be less than the end date. And then finally, I do the query method. That is what actually executes the search. Then I come down here and I begin with a while loop. This while loop is just basically saying while there is actually glide records available, like I go to the next one and there's something there, I'm going to first define the user. And the way that I get the user is, again, I have my object, my room request table stored in this variable gr dot requested by, that is the field name, and then get ref record. That method is used because it is going to be called on a requested by field. And it's just used to get the record that is being referenced. And then after I have that user stored in that variable, I have some if logic. So if the user is valid, all I'm going to do is I'm going to save that user's email, the room that they selected, and then I'm going to save all of that inside of a variable called booking details. So line 26, remember that GS stands for glide system, and all I'm doing is I'm adding an event to the queue. And I have the name of the event, and then I have some parameters here. Parameters are just what will be passed in when this function is called. So I'm going to pass gr, which again, remember, is just the room request object that we made in line 14. I have the user's email, and then I also have the booking details. So again, those are passed as parameters. Finally, we have the type here, which again is just booking reminder, just kind of like a label. And then finally, we have our new keyword. And remember, that new keyword just creates a new instance of this booking reminder class that we created from up here. And once that new instance has been created, the send reminders method will be called on it. And again, send reminders is here. And now we can use this booking reminder code throughout. So we will be using this again.
So our next major topic within automation is events. Events are important because they help us to know that something notable or significant has occurred. And the life cycle of an event begins with the event registry. This is where the event is placed so that it has the possibility to be recognized by the system. So let's check out what registering an event looks like.
The thing that I'm trying to accomplish here is when the system finds that there is a booking schedule for the next day, it will send out an automatic email. So to even have a response to an event, you have to start the event. And the way that an event begins is in the event registry. So you will click new. And I actually have one that I created specifically for this. So remember, you always can click on update it because it'll show you the most recent one that you made. And you fill out the part. So you begin with the suffix. So mine will be booking room reminder. The application is already in there and it's read only, and the event name. If there was a specific queue that you wanted, you could put it there. And then as usual, we have that caller access, but we have caller restriction if we only want to authorize certain users. And then we have that caller tracking if we want like a trail of who did what. In the table, we make sure that we select the room request table because this is the table that will generate the event. And then I just put in information here also in the description, just for organization purposes. And then once you have filled out all of these parts, you will click update.
Now that I have my room booking reminder registered, that means the system is ready to recognize this event whenever it is triggered. So there are two main ways that I'm going to talk about how an event can be responded to. The first is through an email notification. And when I'm building that email notification, there are three important things to make sure are included. So first is when to send it. Then it is who will receive it. And finally, what will it contain? Next, the second way that an event can be responded to is through a script action. And the way this works is when the condition is met, server-side JavaScript is executed to complete whatever action was defined within the code. So let's take a closer look at how an email notification would take place to respond to an event.
So we have our event in our registry, and now it is time to craft our email notification response. And the way that you do this is you go to all in the application navigator, begin typing email and then notifications. If you didn't have one already done, you would click on new and then you would begin filling it in. But I do have one already created for this, which again, room booking reminder. And you begin with the name, the type. So mine is the email. Make sure it's active. And then as usual, you have to select the table. Again, this is all based on the room request table. For the category, you can just look up the list and find the one that fits best with what event notification you're going to have. You can select allow digest and then you can add a description here. So the description is that this email is going to be sent to remind the user that they have a booking for the next day. And these, again, are the 3 important things when we're talking about email notifications: when to send, who will receive, and what it will contain. So in the when to send, mine is going to be when the event is fired. So as soon as this event is fired, which will be using a scheduled job, but we're not there yet. So mine will happen when the event is fired, but you also can have it happen when a record is inserted or updated or triggered. You have the event name because remember, we registered this event in the event registry. So you wouldn't even be able to get this far if you hadn't done that. So yes, we select the event name. The wait is important. We have multiple notifications that are triggered simultaneously and it's for the same record and the same recipients. So the wait, if your wait is 0, those will always be sent. If you have a non-zero number, whichever one has the greatest value is the one that will be sent. And if you have multiple notifications that are being sent at the same time to the same people, and they all have high non-zero wait values, and none of them are higher than the other, then all of those notifications will be sent. So that is why wait is important. We then can add conditions if needed, and then if you needed advanced conditions as well. So after when to send, then we have to go to who will receive. So in the who will receive, you can select users, you could do users and groups. And for me, I did the requested by .email. So that way it is going to the user who requested that booking and then to their email. And then here's where users can subscribe to the email notifications. And you can send it to the event creator as well. When you're doing this, please make sure that your users have their notifications enabled, because if they don't, they're not going to be able to receive it. Then we will have the what it will contain. And this is really what we want to be able to send. So you have your content type. You can include attachments. You also can omit the watermark, but remember, watermarks are how ServiceNow kind of matches or connects an email to existing records. So just be mindful of that. You also have push message only, importance, from reply. You have all of those available to you. The email template that you want to use, you will put here. You don't have to put one if you want to just do it manually, but this is the one that I used. I have my subject here, and then I have the message. Inside the message, you can access the different fields by using the $ along with the brackets. But if you don't want to do it that way, you also can just use the fields over here. And if you needed to expand it, you would just click on the plus sign. So that is there as well. And so then you'll click submit. Mine will just be update because I already created it. You also can preview the notification to make sure it looks like how you actually want it. And once you have that, you just submit it. And now my notification is ready to go. And it will just be waiting for when the event is fired, and that is when it will be triggered.
As we continue to talk about automation, we have to talk about scheduled jobs. Scheduled jobs automate the execution of scripts at predetermined or scheduled times. They also can execute those scripts on a reoccurring basis. This is great because it gives developers the control to execute tasks right when we want them to. And it's great because scheduled jobs can also be used to trigger events. Once a scheduled job is saved, we then can click the Execute Now button, which will allow us to test that scheduled job right then, and we don't have to wait until the specified time. So let's take a look at how I use scheduled jobs in my room booking reminder feature.
To create a schedule script execution in Studio, you just go to Create, begin typing scheduled script execution, and it's right there at the bottom, and then you would click Create. I have one here. The name is Send Booking Reminders. Make sure that it is active. The application is already there because I'm in the scope. And you select how often you want it to run, because remember, this is how it knows when to run this code automatically. I'm going to have mine run daily, and you select the time zone that you want it to execute in, and then the time where you want this to take place. So I put it at 7 o'clock just so it wouldn't happen like right in the middle of the day. And then you put the script that you want it to run, because remember, that's its job. So this script that is going to run is, remember, this is the script include that I made from before. So this is the code that will be executed daily through this scheduled script execution. And I can click Execute Now, because again, Execute Now will show up as soon as you save it. So if I click Execute Now, that is going to run it right now. I don't have to wait until 7 o'clock because I just want to be able to test it. That is a great feature. And so if I go back into the main ServiceNow browser, and as long as there is a matching record for a booking for tomorrow, I can go to System Logs, and there should be a log there that shows that the email was successfully sent. And there it is. So I was able to use a scheduled job to execute the script include daily to send out booking reminders for users that have rooms booked for the next day.
And just like that, we made it through automation. I hope those automation topics and concepts enhanced your application, because I know they did for mine. We were able to cover Flow Designer and see how flows really can enhance the automation for different tasks within our application. And we covered events and how events can be responded to, and how to use scheduled jobs to once again enhance our automation. I'll see you next week.